Hey, do you like money? I bet you do. Otherwise, why are you watching this podcast? So over $1 billion is involved in this piece of money that almost no one pays attention to. I'm Dr. Paul Young. Welcome back to the Music Talk from the North State. My friend here, Tommy G, he's one of my students, and he's an artist and he's a producer, and he brought this up and he said, we haven't talked about this yet, and he was right. So, SoundExchange.
All right, well, thanks for having me, Dr. Paul. Hi, everybody. So SoundExchange last year collected over $1 billion, and that's the third year in a row that they've collected over $1 billion. And if you are an artist, a musician, want to start a record label, you need to know what agencies are collecting the money that is owed to you. So SoundExchange collects royalties for the sound recording copyright, and like you said, over $1 billion. But they only distributed $959 million of that $1 billion. So that means that there's millions of dollars left on the table that people aren't collecting because they don't know about it.
Right. This is not the topic for the songwriters. This is the ones for the recordings. So like my friend Tom, he actually is also a songwriter. But when you are an artist and a producer and those kinds of things, there's money that's there for you. What makes this money different than other money? Because I bet you're probably, if you put a track out, you probably put it on Spotify, you probably put it on Apple Music, you probably put it on SoundCloud. But what we're going to talk about is actually the thing you're probably not paying attention to, which is Pandora, XM Sirius, iHeartRadio.
So yeah, the distinction between Spotify and Apple Music versus Pandora and XM Sirius, Spotify and Apple Music are considered interactive, which means that you have control over what you want to listen to and when you want to listen to it. And Pandora and XM Sirius are considered non-interactive, meaning you have less control about what you're hearing. So SoundExchange collects money for the non-interactive sources.
The sound recording copyright. That sounds like a lot of words. It means the recording. And when you make those things, that's covered by copyright. It's only been about 130 years or whatever we've had recordings. It's not even been a business for that long. But in 1972, there was some record piracy that happened. And I don't mean the piracy that you think of when you're on the internet. I'm talking about piracy literally of vinyl records. People were making them and selling them next to the other ones. And so in 1972, they passed a law where they added sound recordings to copyright. Radio got pissed and said, hey, you're giving us these records. We're not going to pay you for that copyright when we have to pay for the song. Well, they already had to pay for the song. But they're like, you're giving this to me. I'm not going to pay you. And they went, that's fine. We're not going to ask you for that. In 1995 and 1998 rolled around when the digital era came about. And all of a sudden, there was webcasts. And there were people from home making their own kind of playlists and things. And it was through Live 365 as opposed to Spotify because there wasn't a Spotify yet. And so what happened was the record business went to Congress and said, add this to copyright, please. We need to be able to go after not just record piracy, but now we need to get paid for what radio would have paid us for, but we're not going to ask radio for it. We're going to ask digital. So in 1998, sound recordings were added to copyright law for digital performances, broadcasts that are digital. That's why we're talking about XM Sirius, or it's why we're talking about iHeartRadio, that's why we're talking about Pandora. And it's a webcast, broadcast, webcast. But that's not Spotify. That's not what you control. Like you were talking about with interactive and non-interactive and that kind of thing. Okay, so over $1 billion is coming in for webcasts and digital broadcasts. But that's now. And now, how many years later? Well, this law passed because record labels said, well, this is not radio. I'm not getting my promotion off of this. That was 1998. And then they got us in there and said, we need a sound recording copyright digital performance right. Webcasts, sound recordings, and they got the thing passed. And Congress said yes. And all of a sudden, there's over $1 billion in the last 3 years. And it's been just ranking up and up and up and up and up. The SoundExchange was created for the purpose of clearing that and getting that money for us. They're a government-sanctioned organization to go get money for artists and labels. What Tommy said was really good because he goes, you want to start your own label? There's money for an artist and there's money for a label in this. If you don't have a label, you're the label, you get the other half.
Yeah. So yeah, the way the money is split up for SoundExchange, the featured artist gets 45%, non-featured artists, vocalists, and instrumentalists get 5%, and then the owner of the sound recording copyright gets 50%, which is the label, and if you don't have a label, you're the label, so you would get that 50% as well. So if you're a music producer, something called the AMP Act passed recently, and this allows you to negotiate points on the record so that you can collect royalties as well. And basically, once you negotiate with the artist can send what's called a letter of direction to SoundExchange so that you can get paid these royalties.
Right. So out of that 50% that goes to the label, and if there's no label, that's the artist's money. That 45% that Tommy was just talking about that goes to the artist, that's what Tommy's referring to. This AMP Act also said producers need to be part of it. It's the act for music producers to get the piece of the artist's money.
So if you want to collect royalties through SoundExchange, you just need to go to their website and create an account. That's what I did. It's a pretty easy process. And then from there, you just register your recordings, and their metadata is very important, like your ISRC code, the song name, the record label name, who the owners of the sound recording copyright are, which is often the record label, or if you're the artist and you don't have a record label, and then genre, song length. The more you can give them, the better, so that they can recognize those songs in their system and associate them with your account so that you can get paid.
ISRC stands for International Standard Recording Code. ISRC is basically like the social security number of a track. So they know what track. The recording has a title that sounds like something else. That's the identifier that says my recording, this recording. Tommy, you can see him as Tommy G on Spotify and on YouTube and those kinds of things. And I know that you've got more of a fan base over there on the interactive kind of thing. But what's the difference for you?
So every couple months, I see a couple $100s come in from streams. The majority of my listeners are on Spotify and YouTube, that sort of thing. And yeah, I'm not seeing a whole lot of action on the non-interactive side with services like Pandora and iHeartRadio, XM Sirius, like we mentioned before. So even though I'm signed up with SoundExchange and have registered my songs, I haven't received a payout yet, because there's like a minimum threshold that you have to reach first. But that's just in my particular case with the demographic of my audience. And if your audience is using Pandora and those types of services, you might have more money sitting there waiting for you.
Oh, right. And it's still worth doing it anyway, right? Because you blow up. You're already at 50,000 monthly listeners, and they're following you. And that audience is going to continue to grow, and they're going to move around on services and that kind of stuff. So it's still worth it, isn't it? Even if you haven't seen the money yet?
Totally, yeah. I think to get yourself set up for, future success.
Absolutely. Did it cost you anything to really go to SoundExchange?
No, it's free to sign up. They're a nonprofit organization. Their sole purpose is to collect these royalties and distribute them to artists and sound recording copyright owners, because that's what you are owed by copyright law.
Right. I was young once. I don't like Pandora a whole lot myself, but I don't hate them. But I have a nice car, and I do have XM Sirius. And when he grows up and you grow up and we grow up like me, because I'm old, then we turn those things on. And all of a sudden, there's more money, because these things live forever. These recordings, they live forever. And your money lives for your life plus 70 years. Watch my copyright episode and I'll tell you more about that one. Performance rights organizations, Tommy was bringing this up earlier. Just break down the words, the right to perform. Oh, we can all perform. You get paid when it's broadcast and you play live for the right to perform under copyright. It's one of our 5 basic rights of copyright. One of them is the right to perform publicly. And we actually get paid for that. I know that most people don't realize it, but most people, when they think about what is a performance rights organization, they say ASCAP and BMI if they know that much. And that's not wrong. But those are for songs. ASCAP, BMI, Global Music Rights, CSAC. There are 4 of them here in the United States, and there's one in every country that collects for our songs when they get performed. But when I was saying a little bit about history, 1972, sound recordings got added to copyright, and all of a sudden SoundExchange is collecting. We got a new performance rights organization for sound recordings when it's digital. So there's a difference between performance rights organizations that are about the song copyright and about the sound recording copyright. So I just want to make that clear about what is ASCAP and what is BMI. Now, they are the ones that collect for the song copyright, but they can control all of broadcast and all of the live things. We're sitting right here at the Madison Bear Garden. We call it the Bear here in Chico. And when our bands play in that other room right over there, or they play in this room right here, the song owner gets paid. The composer, call him a songwriter, gets paid. But SoundExchange is not collecting here, and nobody else is. So it's still a performance right, but because these 2 copyrights are different, we have to start paying attention a little bit more to what makes them distinct. So, the song and the sound recording are different. Well, I've got good buddies that work at ASCAP and that kind of stuff, and they've already told me. And you can look this up on ASCAP.com. You can look this up on BMI.com, because they're nonprofit organizations. They spill everything in front of you. You can look at it for yourself. ASCAP collects over $1 billion. BMI collects over $1 billion. But that's for the song copyright. That's for the songwriter. That's for the people that own songs. SoundExchange is collecting over $1 billion too. But as we were talking about in class, you were reminding me about this. Actually, the recording gets more money than the song does when it is on Pandora, XM, Sirius, and iHeartRadio. Not here at the Bear, only songwriters, But on those 3 services, just 3 big ones, they have more money that they're bringing in for those plays because, for the most part, I'll try to make this as simple as I can. It costs more money to market a recording than it does a song. If you own a song and you go, hey, I got a new song, you know what you need to find? An artist who says, I'll go record that song. And you might need to find a music supervisor and go, I got a song. They're going to go, on what recording? All of a sudden you got to your next problem. You go, no, I got the recording. If you have both, you have 2 copyrights. So ASCAP and BMI are bringing in money, multi-billions, but SoundExchange for just 3 services, for just one type of copyright is making all this money.
So yeah, for the non-interactive side of things, the services like Pandora, they keep about 30% for themselves. 5% goes towards ASCAP and BMI for the song copyright.
Right.
And then for the recording copyright, where SoundExchange is, they keep 65%. And like you were saying, that's because the owner of the sound recording typically markets the song.
Yeah, right. So they spend more money to make money, so they get more money off of the thing. And if you just think about it for the process of, what does it take to tell the world that I have a new song? Not much. The world doesn't care. They don't need to know. Artists need to know. Producers need to know. Labels need to know you have a new song. What does it take to tell the world that I have a new recording? Now I have a lot more work to do. And if I have to spend money to make money, that's built into this law and this stuff. So the percentage that you just gave, you said 30% was going to go to the service. That's about right, you know? And about 5% of it is going to go to the song. Well, that other percentage is actually not a percentage. It's just what's left when we do our own math, right? They actually have their own rates in law. This is a real law that has actual dollars and cents for who's a subscriber and who's not a subscriber, and you looked it up and you were telling me about it.
Yeah, so it's 0.3 of a penny for paid subscription and 2.4 of a penny for non-paid subscription.
Okay, so if you get a play on Pandora, you literally get 0.3 of a penny for one subscriber, one play once. And a non-subscriber, you get a little less than that. You get a little less than 0.3, but it's what, 2.4 of a penny? And you go, well, that's not good money. Multiply it, promote it. In this law that got the SoundExchange situation passed, they also set what's called a webcasting rate. It's a royalty rate. So when you were talking about the percentages, you were correct. The services are going to keep around 25 to 30% of the money for themselves before they pay anything out. And the other performance rights organization, ASCAP and BMI and so forth, they're only getting about 5%. That's a topic for another time, why that's so small for the song. But when you said there's about 65% left for the sound recording, a lot of that is because it costs more money to market a sound recording than it does a song. And that's a short answer. It's not an actual percentage that's being sent to the recording. They're keeping a percentage for themselves. They're paying a percentage to the other performance rights organization for the song, but what's left is getting paid out. Now, when we average that out, it's like 60, 65% or something like that.
Sure.
It's actually based on a rate, and you were telling me that those were updated.
Yes, so there's new rates for 2023. These rates are set by the Copyright Royalty Board. You can look them up. For 2023, the rates are 0.3 of a penny for a paid subscriber stream and 2.4 of a penny for a non-paid subscriber stream.
And that doesn't sound like it adds up to much, you know, 0.3 of a penny? Well, then you promote it. 0.3 of a penny times how many people are listening. That's on you, my friends. You got to get us in there. And subscribers on XM Series, it's a 100% subscriber basis. You don't get XM Series for free. Pandora, most of people use the free version. They do have a paid version of those kinds of things too. But 0.3 of a penny versus 2.4 of a penny, it's not much difference. We don't affect who's a subscriber and who's not. What we affect is that we promote this thing and we start seeing this money. That's what added up to $1 billion being paid out to labels and artists last year. And who got it? The ones that promoted the most. Tommy, this is not a worldwide money though, right?
No.
Tell me why.
So SoundExchange only collects royalties in the United States.
Okay.
And other countries don't collect royalties for us, unless there's something called a Territorial Agreement.
Yeah.
And SoundExchange has about 35 of these with different countries.
Really? I didn't know that. There's a little over 200 countries, a little under 200 countries in the world. 35 of them have got a reciprocal agreement with SoundExchange to collect this money? Mm-hmm. Well, that makes sense because everywhere except Iran, China, and North Korea, they collect performance rights money. And I'm not mad at them. I'm just telling you, quite literally, it's a copyright law. So when you said that SoundExchange is only U.S., it's because of that history thing I told you about. 1972, they added the sound recordings to copyright law. And then 1998, got SoundExchange. Well, that's a U.S. law. So that makes some sense. Tell me more.
So for example, take the song Empire State of Mind by Jay-Z and Alicia Keys.
Yeah.
Since they are both the featured artists, they would split the 45%. Rock Nation is the record label who owns the sound recording, so they would get 50%. Yeah?
Yeah, I worked there. Yeah, I remember that when that came out. Yeah.
And then there's the 5% left over for the instrumentalists and vocalists.
Good. Okay. So he's so right. And it's called Rockefeller Records. It's a joint venture with Def Jam that's owned by Universal Music Group, and I worked there when that thing came out. Jay-Z made me more money than probably anybody. Not me directly, but I can tell you, I'm also a trombone player, and I know that's weird, that's silly, and that's so 20th century. But I would be one of the non-featured artists in the 5%. How would I get my money? Let's say Tommy sang on the track and I played trombone, okay, for Jay-Z and Alicia. If I were playing the session and I was in the recording session, I'd get 2.5 on my side for all of the instrumentalists, and all of the Tommies and all the singers would get 2.5 for their side. How do they find us? We'd have to be in a union. It's called the American Federation of Musicians. I'm not trying to tell you whether you want to join a union or not, but if you like money, this is where this money's going. And I would get a small little piece of that because I played trombone on one recording, and everybody else would have to split the other 2.5%. If Tommy was the singer, he would be in SAG-AFTRA. That's where the singers go. And if Tommy was playing guitar and singing, he would have 2 unions he'd have to join just to get this other 5%. The 5%'s not the big money. We already said he's got 50,000 listeners. He's hardly getting this money kind of right now. This is the 5% of the other percent that's on Pandora and XM, Sirius, and iHeartRadio. But this is how we get it. So if you want to look it up, afm.org. That's the Musicians Union for Instrumentalists. SAG-AFTRA, SAG-AFTRA. That's the one for the vocalists.
Yeah, to finish off this example, for the music producers, like we mentioned before, even sound engineers, you can negotiate your points on the record, and whatever you negotiate, that would come out of the featured artist's 45%. So as we mentioned earlier, sound recordings were added to copyright law in '72. And then later, this digital performance royalty was added, but the word digital gave radio a loophole to continue to not pay for the sound recording.
Well said, yeah.
But today, SoundExchange is trying to fix that. There's something called the Performance Right Act, and if it is passed, it would require radio to pay the performance royalties for sound recordings.
Right. Every broadcaster and everything live, everywhere where we get paid for a song, all of a sudden would start to get paid for a recording too. And that doesn't mean if you're performing, you go, I have to pay? No. Let me tell you something about live. Your venue pays. And let me tell you something about broadcasting. The broadcaster pays. Let me tell you something, musicians. We're talking about you getting more money from people you didn't have to pay and you didn't have to ask for anything.
So I found a quote. I listened to it to a podcast. It's called The DIY Musician by CD Baby. Yeah. And they had this guy, Brian Calhoun, who's the Vice President of New Media and External Affairs at SoundExchange. He was currently when they did the podcast. He said, "We find it fundamentally unfair that a service or an AM/FM radio station can play somebody's sound recording and not either ask or provide any compensation and make money."
Yeah, because they're paying for the song, they're paying for the composer and the person who owns the song, but then what SoundExchange is saying, you can pay for the song and you can pay for the songwriter, but you can't pay for the artist and you can't pay for the person who owns the recording
It's unfair.
Yeah, it's unfair if you come from a musician standpoint. Radio goes, but we can't pay that. From my experience, less than 5% of their total budget goes to music. When a business can pay less than 5% for their product, and keep all the advertising money, and it's a hard business to be in. I'm not being mad at radio. That's like a wholesale price. I'm partial to musicians every day of the week. I love artists, and I want people who market and promote things to get paid. So I agree with you, and I'm glad Brian Calhoun brought that up. Just look them up, the DIY Musician Blog, DIY Musician Blog. Look them up. They're a great resource for us. If you're trying to get your career off the ground, DIY, do it yourself. That's a good service. I'm glad you're listening to that podcast. Yeah. Now, CD Baby, I want to fill that one in for you guys as well. Record companies. I work for a record company. We had our own trucking and all this kind of stuff to get to record stores. And I know I sound like I'm from the before time because I am. CD Baby was the first distributor that was saying, hey, if you're an independent artist and you are not with a label, we can get your product to your fans. And they first set up a website called cdbaby.com. They've renamed themselves Disc Makers. And what that is you can get vinyl or you can get CDs and those kinds of things, and you pay them to make some manufacturing for you. They also are a conduit to get to Spotify and Apple and all that kind of stuff now. The DIY Musicians blog and the DIY Musicians podcast is a really good resource from a company that's been around for over 20 years. Thank you, Derek Sievers, for creating that company. I love you, buddy. Hey, Tommy, thank you for bringing this to this audience and bringing all this to me, because you had some information I didn't know about that's been updated, and I really appreciate you for it, and giving it to them. If you are a musician, you want to be an engineer, you want to be a sound person, you want to be a professional in any way in this business, that's what this podcast is about. Music Talk from the North State is for people that are outside the major mainstream. That's Tommy G. He's on Spotify, he's on YouTube. You should check out his music. This was his idea to do this today, and I'm so glad you came and did this.